It's taken 21 years for me to finally watch this film, and mainly because I'm doing the psychology degree. That's what spurred this. It's been on my list, it's been available to me for a long while, but I've kind of sat there going, not right now, not in the mood for it, haven't got the time or energy. But yes, I'm here to finally talk about 2001's A Beautiful Mind, directed by Ron Howard, with the screenplay written by Akiva Goldsman based on the book of the same name by Sylvia Nassar. It stars Russell Crowe in an amazing performance, I will say. Jennifer Connelly, Paul Bettany, Anthony Rapp, Christopher Plummer, so many good people in this. And like I say, this fascinated me. Conceptually, years ago I knew a bit about it and thought it sounded interesting, but I didn't know everything about it. And then in a recent lesson during my university course, we talked about John Nash Jr. And my brain, even though I hadn't seen the film, was throwing out the name A Beautiful Mind. And I was like, oh, I never got around to watching that. But then it was confirmed that yes, this was the guy, etc., and his struggles with schizophrenia were not... It didn't stop him being a great mathematician. It just made it more difficult for him to focus on being a great mathematician. Now, there is, or there has been, criticism levelled at the book. One major one being that it was unauthorised. It wasn't at all involving the family, so there's stuff in there that... Is it true? You know, if it's not been authorised, not been approved. But at the end of the day, I'm not here to debate that. I'm here to talk about this film and how important it is, I think. Whilst not everyone experiences schizophrenia in the same way, of course, I think it's a very interesting look at one man's specific journey. And there's been stuff out there, you know, I saw, conversation with the family, because unfortunately, his son Johnny also has schizophrenia, because there is a likely genetic or, hereditary component to it. But it is a fascinating area. The one reason that I've become fascinated with it is because one of our assessments involves talking about a specific type of treatment with a specific type of disease. Two of them on offer are things that I've dealt with. Schizophrenia isn't one, so for me it's kind of that meat to keep me going, something interesting. And stories like this just really help that. Now, a lot of people have a poor understanding of schizophrenia, and I think this film does that well, because a lot of people think, because it's from split, schizo split from Greek, and phrene mind, people think it's like multiple personalities, now known as dissociative identity disorder or DID. But it's not. It's not a split in that sense, it's more of a fracture between your self and the reality. It's more of a disconnect. It's where you will have positive symptoms which add to what everyone else experiences, which are like the hallucinations, etc. But then there's negative symptoms, which doesn't mean that, the positive are good symptoms and the negative are bad. It's just that the negative are impairing your function, so your cognitive ability, etc. So yeah, it's a fascinating area, and people deal with this. Some people suffer from it, some people live with it. I don't think anyone should say for any illness they have, I suffer with this. Sometimes, especially with lifelong things that can be managed through treatment, but you still are, you still have that condition. With those kind of things, it is that you can learn to live with it. I often say about some of my conditions, not necessarily all of them, I live with this, or I have dealt with this, or I experience this. Sometimes when I'm having really bad days, I might say I'm suffering with this, because at that point I am. But a film like this shows that there is some positivity, even in this issue of disconnection from reality. The genius that John Nash has cannot be downplayed just because he's a man with schizophrenia. The fun times that he's had with some of these fictional people isn't completely removed by the negative experiences that have led him to being hospitalised, etc. I think it's very important to take note of how attitudes and how we deal with these things have changed over the years. There is a very hard scene to watch of a form of shock therapy. A lot of people think it's ECT, but it's not, because there's no electrodes on his system. It's ICT, insulin coma therapy, which is a type of shock therapy because it's shocking the system. It doesn't have to be electric shock. So it's where they flood your system with insulin to put you into a coma, the seizures happen, and the idea is apparently that clears your brain. Now, comas are the body's way of going, something is really wrong, I need to shut down. It's your, like, turn it on and off again. You know, if we were computers, that's what the IT team would do, turn us off and on again. That's kind of what a coma is. I mean, that's a very simplistic definition. No one take that as my official definition of comas. No one with medical backing say I don't know what I'm talking about. I know I don't know what I'm talking about, but this is my layperson understanding. A coma is the body's like, nope, cannot deal, need to shut down to deal with this. That is not a body's healthy state. And thinking that inducing a coma to treat something like this would work is misguided at best, but it was an earlier time. We didn't have the understanding we do now. Things like ICT, things like ECT, the electroconvulsive, don't exist anymore, apart from in very specific cases. There are people who elect to have electroconvulsive therapy because medication and stuff doesn't work for them. That's their choice, though. A doctor isn't holding them down and going, you're having this because it's the only thing we know how to do. Earlier treatments would potentially sort of zombify patients, as it were, and this also happens in depression. The old tricyclics were very similar to do this, and I guess it's like when people take Benadryl now, particularly the US version, where the joke is that you can't have an allergic reaction if you're asleep. That was the idea. These older treatments to sedate them, to put them in a state of just non-activity, you can't be a problem. That's a problem. Thinking that you just get rid of the problem, like the old asylum system. And we see that in this film. We see John just basically existing. Not living, existing. Because he's dulled and also kind of terrified. But even through that, we see later on in the film him sort of making some notes. He's still working on mathematical ideas. It's just he's having trouble getting all the information out. But the problem is he needs the antipsychotics. What we see in the film when he starts coming back to mathematical ideas is when he's taking himself off the meds. And then he starts having the bad reactions again. He's having these hallucinations. And, later in life he did find a better balance. And I think, like everyone, he had good days and bad days, because that's what happens. But he still got that Nobel Prize in economics because he developed game theory. Not the whole MatPat thing, but the idea of game theory, that a zero-sum game is literally that. And we see it in the film, when he's talking about if we all go for the blonde, I think it was, then no one gets her. But if we go for everyone else, then we come away with something. Rather than us all competing for the same resource, we divide the resources up. And that's something that people, have understood now. We now understand that competing isn't the only way. And in fact, it's often the worst way. But yeah, this film really had some great moments. I mean, I've talked about more the psychological underpinnings, I think, than the film, but it's because I obviously now have that backing and could appreciate it on those grounds. I say that backing to like I'm qualified. I'm not even in the first year, not even completed the first foundation year yet. But still, there's a lot in this film that I love. The performances, I did mention Ed Harris at the start. I love him in almost everything from this time period-ish. He's really good in the role, in playing someone that doesn't exist. Same with Paul Bettany. These people are not played in the film as though they're not real, even when because to John they are. So if we're experiencing it like John would, we need to believe that these are real to him. Even if we know logically, conceptually, they are just hallucinations. They're in his mind. The fact that it's done so well. I mean, I knew, again, because I knew the background. Paul Bettany's not really there. This character is not a real being and not a real person. That was an easy one for me to get. But when the CIA started getting involved, I'm like, well, this time it does make sense. So it's not outside the realms of possibility. And he sees the shadow in the window of the house that no one lives in. Some of these reveals, I always like in films, I like to guess what's going to happen, yes, but I like it when a film surprises me. It doesn't go the way that I've predicted, because that means that I was bought in, I bought into the fabric of the reality of this world. I bought into the deception you were giving me, and I'm fine with that. I'm very happy with that as an idea. So I love those reveals when it's like, no, it's not real. this is all in his mind too. He's literally just running out and putting stuff in a letterbox for a place that doesn't exist. And yeah, having someone in his life who has to deal with that. I mean, I joke a lot that my previous issues have been good training for Amy now working in the care field. But it's very hard to find someone who's willing to stand by someone with mental health difficulties at their worst as well as at their best. You know, the whole marriage thing in sickness and in health, better for poor, etc. It's very hard to find someone who really agrees with that, who really lives by that. And John did well, I will say. You know, he found someone willing to stand by him, to understand that the hallucinations are a part of John, but that's not all that John is. And like I said earlier, our attitudes to mental health and issues have improved over time. And I think a lot more of us are willing to see people as people with conditions, not the condition itself. But I still think it's rare to find someone like Amy, like Alicia, who will stand by. So yeah, it's taken far too long. This is why this is a finally. But I'm kind of glad I came to it with the understanding of the condition a little better. I think I got more out of it than if I'd have just come to it completely blind and gone for the ride. I'd have still enjoyed the reveals, but I wouldn't have had the backing of the knowledge that I do now. It's come at the right time for me, and seriously, if you've sat on it yourself for this long, I'm sorry that I've spoiled everything for you, but I always put a spoiler warning at the start for that reason. But seriously, watch it. It deserved the praise, you know, I would say that. And everyone here gave a great performance, well acted, well directed, and definitely worth a look if you haven't. But that's all I want to say about it. Great piece. So until next time, as always, thank you for watching and take care.